Blair Peach was killed in circumstances that are so brutal that even after 40 years you feel ashamed of how the police treated a simple gesture of solidarity.
All the suppression of our community was done so that a handful of National Front people could come on this step and make the Nazi salute. It resulted, as you know, with hundreds of people being arrested, many injured, Blair Peach killed, and the community has still not had any answer for what really took place.
The National Front wanted to organize a public meeting in the center of Southall, so they chose the town hall to organize an election meeting, openly calling for repatriation of black people and brown people, and they wanted to give a message where multicultural societies would be destroyed and erased in Britain. In fact, one of the National Front speakers, the leader of the group at the meeting, said that he wants the Southall as a town to be demolished and it to be replaced by an English hamlet.
Southall fought back. Southall fought back. But it did not have the support of the state. Instead, it was criminalized. That was the intention. And the destruction and the conflict in the opposing presentations of that day was clear then and it's clear now. It was good against evil. There wasn't any question mark. Fascists had come into Southall and their foot soldiers and their cavalry were the police.
It's often the community that's described as the ones who were rioting and as the ones who were violent and the police defending themselves against a violent, disorderly mob. But actually it wasn't. This was a peaceful protest in '79. It was the police who were rioting that day because they're the ones that were displaying a form of state racism that had complete and utter disregard for human life. It's no coincidence that Blair Peach was killed, Clarence Baker suffered a fractured skull, other people suffered, life-threatening injuries. It was the police that day who were rioting because they were the violent ones.
It lives with me even after 40 years. There's been no justice for Blair Peach and no justice for loads and hundreds of people who had their lives disrupted, who were either injured or who ended up with criminal records for doing absolutely nothing. In most cases not even being part of it, but even if you were part of it and were planning to be part of it, all you were doing was wanting to be peaceful and to protest against a fascist organisation meeting in the town.
On 23rd of April, the National Front was supposed to come at 7:30, but the police created a sterile area, what they call a sterile area, around Southall Town Hall, around at 11:30 in the morning, some 6 hours before the meeting. And they started arresting people at 11:30 in the morning and used policing tactics, wedges to take out the leadership. By 7:30, over 700 people had been arrested in a period of hours. What we saw was an orgy of violence by the police. People in Southall was simply trying to protest peacefully. Their plan was to have a massive sit-down outside the Southall Town Hall so the National Front couldn't get into the building. But police operations that day were so violent and brutal that, it's one of the most scariest moments in my life. Use of helicopters, use of dogs, use of special patrol group. It resembled an occupied town by police.
Blair was a special needs teacher in Tower Hamlets. He was a dedicated teacher, a member of the NUT and in fact president of East London Teachers Association. He was also an anti-racist and had campaigned against the National Front in Brick Lane. He and some of his teacher friends came. I came later and never saw him here, but they came to demonstrate, and as you know, what happened here, that the streets were blockaded and the town was flooded by 5,000 police. The community was pushed back into roads all around. People were beaten indiscriminately, and about 7 o'clock, people were starting to leave, and Blair and his friends moved up to Beechcroft Avenue, and on the corner of Beechcroft and Orchard he was standing when a Special Patrol Group van, U11, with 6 Special Patrol Group members, led by Inspector Alan Murray, arrived at the corner of Beechcroft and Orchard. Having now seen the Cass report in 2010 when it was released, and for everyone to see, Cass admitted that as there had been 13 eyewitnesses to Blair being hit by a policeman, that he did agree that Blair had been killed by a policeman, but he couldn't identify which police officer. Although all the names of the police officers were redacted in the Cass report, he mentioned Special Patrol Group officers E, F and H, and it was clear that E was Inspector Murray, F was PC Bint, and H was PC Raymond White, who was the driver of the van.
On Saturday, at the demonstration, we'll name the 6 officers who we think were responsible for Blair Peach's murder.
Blair Peach was hit by that fascist, I would say, a policeman, and he fell here and he was leaning against his wall.
Should be a public inquiry. The things that happened here 40 years ago have not been fully exposed and brought into the light. We need that public inquiry, and what has happened with Hillsborough is an example of what should happen here, and that truth that's been covered up should be exposed, and anyone guilty should be brought to justice.
Anybody who's concerned about the growth of institutional racism, the pervasiveness of state racism, which has created an unequal community, which has created atomization of people from Somalia with Asian communities or Africans, anybody who's concerned with the growth, come here brother, with the growth of far right, needs to be in Southall on 27th of April. No excuses, you need to be here to remember why Blair Peach was killed, why Gurdeep Singh Chaggas was killed, why Stephen Lawrence was killed, and create a movement which stops the far right to building a massive pressure and presence in Britain. Come, you'll be welcome in Southall.